Hi, welcome to the Fellowship, Urantia Book Fellowship's monthly broadcast. We like to do a streaming broadcast every month for our dear friends on Facebook and anyone else who cares to tune in. And this week this month, I should say, we're doing an interview with the Stepping Stones Committee. And you may wonder what the Stepping Stones Committee is, and I will let their fearless leader, Gina, explain that to you. But first of all, let me introduce you to members of the committee. First off, we have Gina and Albert Lassiter. They live in the Pacific Northwest, in the Coeur d'Alene area, and they're wonderful people involved with the fellowship, and they've stepped up so much to manage our IT needs and different things that are very technical and require a high level of expertise. And they're so generous with their time, and I just appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for all you do. And this has been a real labor of love for you guys. I know you've spent a lot of time with the Stepping Stones project, so I'll let you explain what it is. But first, I'll introduce Pamela Keller, who is a newcomer to the Urantia Book Fellowship, just put on the general council. Congratulations, Pamela. I just got off after 27 years, so I can tell you that's going to be a wonderful experience for you. It's just hard to beat that. And thank you for being such a great volunteer. Pamela's jumped in with both feet, and I love it. You know, a woman after my own heart. And next, the indelible April Helen, who loves us. She signs everything. April Helen loves you, and she does. Your love shines through you like a bright, beautiful beacon. April Helen is from the Oklahoma area, right? And a second-generation reader. And we're so, so delighted that you are a part of this team and a part of our efforts at the fellowship. We really, really appreciate you, April Helen. Thank you. And next are Tom and Marie Vasily from, Bakersfield, California, or those environs. And I met you guys in 1999, or at least I met Tom, and then I met Marie later. And at the UAI conference in Staten Island. And we've been great friends ever since. Tom and I went into a time warp, and we talked almost all night, I think. And we've been fast friends ever since. And so you guys, you are wonderful volunteers. You volunteer in so many invaluable ways. And I thank you so much for your efforts on the Stepping Stone Committee. And last but not least are Bill and Kay Cooper, whom I first met in probably 1982 at the Boulder School, where they were doing a seminar for the Boulder School. And it was absolutely fabulous. And I've been thoroughly impressed with everything you guys do since that moment. And I have to share a funny story about Bill and Kay, because in the audience that night when they were doing their seminar was Clyde Bedell. And at one point, they did a segment in their seminar where they were saying the exact opposite of each other. One would say one thing, the other would say the opposite. And then they went back and forth like that several times. And Clyde Bedell raised his hands and he said, "I know one thing." And they said, "What's that?" He said, "You two can't agree on anything." But that was great fun. And so welcome all of you to the Stepping Stones interview on our monthly podcast or monthly broadcast, whatever you want to call it. And first of all, I'll let Gina give us an overview of what the Stepping Stones is. What's the concept, and how was it created, and where are you going with this?
Yeah, the Urantia Book Fellowship has a nonprofit Google grant of a substantial amount of funds. So every month we need to use that grant, or it just doesn't exist. It goes away. But we've been using the full capability of that Google grant, and there are typically 15 people who come to our website every month, and a lot of them through Google Ads. Ended up analyzing the results and realized that people who come to our site are leaving pretty quickly. And of course, figure out why. All of us who read the book find it such a rich source of spiritual comfort and inspiration that we want to see a way to bring people to be inspired to grow spiritually and to have that comfort and joy in life that we have. And in the that they might read and join us in study groups and general fellowshipping. So how do we do that now with all these people coming to our website? We can't speak to them personally. How do we interact with them in a way that can get them intrigued enough to move into the teachings in a way that can be inspiring and comforting for them? So we believe that people are looking for a source of spiritual learning, and that's why they're finding us. But when they get to our site, they don't see something that speaks to them directly. As soon as they get to our site, news are typically directed to quotes from the book. And the book doesn't speak to a great majority of people until they decide to make the investment to read it. So we thought that maybe we could inspire move in that direction if we create beautiful pages that visitors can explore, derived from the book, but written in a way that's more modern. So we also thought, well, what if we provide ways for people to interact with and fellowship with others about their spiritual ideas? So would that help them be furthered in their self-directed spiritual growth? So right now we're in the process. I think we'll be releasing in about 3 weeks, and we're in the process of finishing up our first launch. And we also have a way for people to interact with real people. So we're hoping that there will be many ways eventually. Our first offering. So does that get to your question, Paula?
Yeah, it does. And actually, having worked on websites quite a bit in the past myself, since creating truthbook.com back in 2000, I know for a fact that the big challenge is always to get people to stay on the page. Oftentimes, especially with the Urantia book, they may have heard of it. They search it on Google. They go there. They end up on a landing page, and they see that it's pretty intense and deep, and they bounce right out of there. And this has been a problem that I have known about from every Urantia webmaster I ever talked to or dealt with over many years. And so I know that's an issue. So is Stepping Stones a way to try to mitigate that problem and get people to go deeper into the teachings because they are so relevant and valuable? And you hate to see people bounce right out of there,
Yeah, we did a lot of analysis at the beginning and tried to figure out how people are actually arriving at the site and what makes them leave and how do we think about it. And I'll let Albert talk to that. Christina, could you bring that? I'll go ahead, Albert. I'll let you.
Yeah, if somebody can screen share the it's kind of a stateful model of the states that visitors go through. I can't tell if it's being shared. Oh,
no, not that, Christina. The actual graphic that.
That's the main course.
Yeah, I think it starts with minimally interested. So with my background as a user interface developer and usability engineer and user-centered design, I made a stateful model of the states that people go through when they arrive at a web page. So if someone types something in Google search and they arrive at our landing page, they're going to start in what I call this minimally interested state. And then if they see things that they like, then they might advance to cautiously assessing. So they're looking at things that are going on. And if they like what they're seeing, they'll go a little bit further. They're like cautiously exploring. And what we want is for people, Gina, can you make our display one? This bottom part here. Okay. And I'm hoping that we can get people to this bottom state of exploring, because until you can get someone to be openly exploring, they can just easily be repulsed by something they see or get offended by something and just go, oh, this is a waste of my time, I'm going to disappear. So we need to get people to migrate through the various stages, eventually get to openly exploring. So the words and images that we use, someone that is new to the Urantia book, is important. And then so anyway, that's part of what we do. Should we go to the next part?
Does that answer your question, Paula, or is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I think that speaks to the whole concept of a stepping stone, right? You take one step and then you cautiously take another step. And if the stones are nice and solid, then they'll guide you in to the end result. And that's what we're all hoping for. We're hoping that people will actually be guided to have a real experience with the revelation. And the problem I think the internet poses is oftentimes it will drop them in at the deepest place, drop them right into the deep end. And that's probably why they bounce out, because they realize they're in over their head. Whereas a stepping stone allows them to reach a more reasonable depth in their own time. So that was great. Thank you for that explanation. Who's your target audience, you guys? Who are you hoping to reach primarily?
Yeah, I'll let Albert talk about that too.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. One of the things we use is user personas, which are definitions of users that we can talk about. And the main part of the Stepping Stones initial work is to target what we call UB newbies. So UB newbies are people that don't know Urantia book, never heard of it, or maybe just barely heard of it, but they really don't know anything about it. And we've split that into 3 different types. There's UB newbies that are God knowing. They know about the idea of God and probably Jesus and angels and a bunch of stuff like that. So if you use those kind of, it's not that much of an issue. But there are also UB newbies that we call UB newbies anti-church. And those are people that, because of their experience so far, they can still be spiritually seeking and want to work on their own self-directed spiritual growth, but they might be certain words, including Jesus and God and angels and a bunch of stuff like that. So so we have to agree on who's our target user. Are we UB newbie anti-church, or UB newbie God knowing, or this third category called UB newbie general, which means we don't know whether they're more God knowing or anti-church yet. And so you use different kind of methods and wording depend on the type of audience that you're targeting there. So we're initially starting with trying to target UB newbies.
Hence, you're trying to keep the language at a neutral level so that you don't scare anyone off the page too quickly. That it's almost impossible not to say God or Jesus or angels or words like that when you're talking about the Urantia book, or even when you're offering quotes from the Urantia book, because that is the language that the book uses. And so at what point in that journey do you finally just let them dive into the actual text? Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think it depends. Like what we're trying to do is create this whole system where people create content that they believe is going to be inspirational to people who don't know about the book but are spiritually hungry. So, and we're also trying to use different people's passions about what they want to talk about and how they want to talk about it. So we can actually start out with talking a neutral language, and we give people all kinds of options to click on other things with titles that may be interesting to them. And then they'll drill in, and if they find something like Albert's model, if they get to a point where they see something that is that doesn't meet their search needs, so it's not necessarily that they're offended as much as when they come to a website, they're looking for something specific. And as soon as they get to a place that isn't relevant to what it is that they're trying to find, then they're out of there. And so, we just, and of course, the Urantia isn't for everybody. And once people get into that space, maybe they'll say, okay, I've had enough. Or maybe they'll come back and they'll say, well, what else is in here that's interesting? Or maybe they'll try and have a conversation with us to really understand what's going on. But so it kind of depends. The question that you're asking is, at what point do we actually start to talk about the book itself? And it's possible that on the webpage, pardon me?
Or offer quotes.
Yeah, and maybe in the book, in the pages that we produce, we won't do that at all. And in fact, we're going to be leading them to conversations, and we could just have conversations about their personal spiritual growth until they get curious. It kind of depends on where people are at, who are hosting those conversations, and who's actually writing the content. About the content is that because we're driving people there through Google Ads, we can actually check and see where people are leaving from. So if somebody arrives to something where we introduce a quote and everybody leaves after that, we have some information, right?
Right.
And then we can play with that. What if we didn't provide a quote here and instead we did this, So it's a process of trial and exploration, I think.
I always loved so much Jesus's teaching that when he told the apostles, come with me and I'll make you fishers of men. And I love that analogy because my dad taught me how to fish when I was 7. And one of the first things you learn as a fisher folk is not to put too much bait on the hook. And also you learn to use the right bait for the right fish. Certain fish don't bite on that bait. You don't want to use that bait if you're fishing for one kind of fish, and if you're fishing for something else, you might use a different kind of bait. And of course, then there's always patience. So that idea of taking your time and exploring, experimenting, we don't really know necessarily in the Urantia movement, in my experience, what's going to work well and what isn't. So we try a lot of different things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm actually delighted. And I have to say that I can't help but it just dawned on me just now. And so I have to state this observation that every single person on your committee here is a wonderful teacher. So you have all of these wonderful professional teachers on this committee, which seems like to me to be just absolutely ideal for what you're trying to accomplish. And so bravo. I don't know how that happened, but I'm sure glad it did. Every single person, a wonderful teacher. So, Bill and Kay, how did you end up getting involved with the Stepping Stones? I know you've been teaching in the Urantia movement for years and years and years, and you're wonderful ministers. And you've explored, you've plumbed the depths of retreats and spiritual adventures, and you've written books, and oh my gosh, I can't think of anything you haven't done, really. You're great leaders. So what got you involved with the Stepping Stones Committee?
Well, our friend Tom Vasily called us and told us about this project that he was involved in, and we thought that was really interesting. And before you knew it, a few weeks later, he called and said, we're going to have a meeting where people who want to find out more about this can come and find out more about it. So we attended, and we said, all right, this is the kind of thing we'd like to do, because we have for a long time tried to take the wealth of help and illumination that we've gotten out of the book and share it with other people in other settings. So that's to a large extent what we're able to do here, because the ads can be something having to do with a person's interests or needs. perhaps relationships or parenting or developing your own self spiritually, all of those kinds of things which we have interests in, can be advertised so that the people are then arriving at the website not looking for a Urantia book, but looking for a topic that they have an interest in. This shows you several of the ones that we have written on a thread that talks about taking charge of your own spiritual growth. What do we mean by spirituality, and what's spiritual growth, and why is it so appealing? And then we get into how we grow spiritually, and can we feel the flow of love, and what is it that helps us to grow spiritually, which includes other people, friends, relationship with the spirit within, cooperating with other people who have interests in this sort of thing, and of course, decisions make a tremendous amount of difference. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that we've written about. I've done all the talking. Would you like to say something, Bill?
Well, I'm enjoying your talking. I've had an interest in seeing what could be advertised from the Urantia book since early involvement in the early 70s of the last century. That makes me sound even older than I feel, which is pretty old. But there was Clyde Bedell and there was Sex Clemian, and they were advocates of advertising, but there was no advertising policy then, so we had to wait. And this is an opportunity to not only do it, but do it in a fairly active way and advertise concepts. What we're writing, and this is just what we're writing, is material that probably will rarely ever quote the Urantia book, but it'll give credit for the concept coming from the Urantia book. And it will have statements that are intended to intrigue a person who's interested in the subject matter of spiritual growth in this instance. And hopefully they will ask the question of themselves and of us, where is this coming from, and is there more information like this available? And you've got a much better qualified candidate for the Urantia book if you get them that far before they even are told about the book.
And if they don't ever get to the book, they've gotten the benefit of some of the ideas in the book that have helped us personally.
Yeah, we try to make that a principle of what we're writing, that there is information in the landing site and in the questions that are asked on the landing site, so that if that's as far as they go, they've still gotten something of, hey, eternal value out of the experience of landing on our site.
You know, I love that you're going in that direction, because whether you overtly introduce the Urantia book to somebody or not, you know, you can still give them something they can keep. And that has been my experience in introducing the Urantia book in an overt way. And always my prayer before one of those introductions is, Father, please let me give them something they can keep. Whether they end up reading the Urantia book or not is not the most important thing. The most important thing is, you know, if you can help them ignite spiritually. And, you know, those nuggets of truth are invaluable to crowd out any error. So I think that's a great thrust. And it seems like that's definitely the direction you guys are going in. And who better than teachers to do that? You know, teachers take complex material and they give it to their students in a way that the student will understand. And that's invaluable, I think. Thank you so much for doing that and for your years of effort in that direction, all of you. So, yeah, it's hard, isn't it, sometimes to introduce the concepts without using the words from the Urantia book. Do you find that to be true? I'll throw it out there to anybody who wants to answer that one.
Well, I would comment. We've been doing that sort of thing for a number of years, so it's probably less difficult for us. Because back when we were writing our Friendship with God book, we were writing for the general public. So we already had to start thinking that way then. But we've been giving a lot of thought to how to translate some of the concepts and some of the personalities of God into understandable language. And it gets, you have to think about it a lot, but it's not that difficult. You do have to shift your thinking in terms of the names and so forth that are in the book. Anyway, that's my comment on it. Others have a something they want to share. Why, go for it.
Yes. I love all of you so much. And I love the fact that Miss Polly brought up, and I wasn't really aware, but now I see it. We are all passionate about sharing in education. I shy away from the word teacher, yet I feel like I'm finally getting to the ownership of that. Coming from this question specifically, coming from a second generation standpoint, and seeing how my mother was so passionate in the evangelism and sales specifically of the book, and how I immediately, as a 5 or 6 year old, realized when I would start speaking these outrageous words and concepts throughout school at that age, throughout all of my young life, I got really good early on about articulating these things without what I call Urantia ease. And it's very valuable. And that is one of my passions about why I'm showing up here at Stepping Stones Project.
Yay. Well, there's that. Oh, that's an interesting slide. There's the stepping stones. Yay. My own daughter, who was is a second generation reader, came home one day from 5th grade class and said, "Mom, it isn't easy being a Urantia kid." And I said, "Why do you say that, honey?" She said, "Well, because some kids were talking about the devil and how he's going to get you." I said, "Nuh-uh, he can't hurt you. He's on a prison world." And I said to her, "What did they say?" And she said, "They just looked at me really funny and went away." So that's the danger of being, and here's the other thing. You read this revelation, and of course we all believe that's what it is. We know if this isn't a revelation, then please show me a revelation, right? And because if this isn't the real deal, I would love to see the real deal. But we get, once you read it, it changes the way you think about things, and you start to think in that way, in terms of, you might not think anything about referring to the place we live as our planet. And a funny little story about that, one of us was out scouting a place for a conference one time, and walking along with a Lutheran minister and looking at all the various facilities. And you all, have experience with conferences, what that's like. And the minister was very thoughtful, and he was pretty much used to more New Age folks. And he said to our member, he said, "So what is it again you guys do?" And the person said, "Well, we're readers of the Urantia book." And he said, "Oh, okay. And what is Urantia?" Well, that's the name of our planet. And the minister thought for a moment and said, so where is this planet you're from? That's the pitfall right there. And it can happen before you even know what happened, right? All of a sudden you've stepped right in it. And now you know he's not going to take seriously another thing you say, but maybe not. So, but that's, a lot of us would immediately say that, right? Well, it's the name of our planet. Oh, okay. So where is this planet you're from? So I saw Tom's hand go up a moment ago, and maybe Tom would like to. Is Tom still around? Oh, Tom.
Looks like he
Well, he
dropped
was.
off.
And it drops out for reasons I don't understand.
Oh, there he is. Hi,
There
Tom.
he is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You had your hand up a minute ago, and I just wanted to make sure you got a chance to say what you had on your mind.
Oh, I was just going to respond to you saying that it's difficult to share the teachings without using the quotes, and it is sometimes difficult because there's so many quotes in the Urantia book that are just really inspiring to me and other readers of the Urantia book. But I did find that it's important to look at those quotes and try to think about them from a person's perspective who has never been introduced to the Urantia book, and then share the information, disseminate it, if you will, the best you can in common, ordinary terminology that most people can understand. And that is a challenge, but it's also an exciting thing to do because it is something that, like Bill said earlier, it's something that can have an impact on people forever, for the rest of their lives and on beyond. So I think it's helpful to do that. And as a teacher, I'm a retired psychology professor, and I found in teaching psychology, every time I taught, I could share some of the truths of the Urantia book without pointing right to the Urantia book, but just sharing it and restating it in more common terminology, like fifth grade language, so that most people can understand what you're saying. And I think that's an exciting and an important thing for us to be doing.
I agree. And it's challenging. You're right. It is challenging. And I find that as a new student of the book, when I was just a kid, every time I'd read it, so much of it would go over my head. So I found that after reading a section, I'd say to myself, now, what did that say to me? What was the main point of that? And I'd review so I could get at least the main concepts. And the value of that is if you do that, then you can give someone else some of the main concepts too, without necessarily having the difficult language involved. So where is the Stepping Stones at right now as a project, and where are you guys, when do you showed us those beautiful pictures of your landing page, and I am so intrigued and I am so impressed. I know the amazing Gary Tong has done a lot of your graphics, and they are so beautiful. And I just want to dive in now. I want to see what you got going on. So when are we going to be able to launch, and what happens after that? You've also mentioned that there is an opportunity for people to interact, and so I think that's really important. Someone would like to jump in on that.
Yeah, I can talk to that for a minute. It's interesting to see this first launch. We're not quite ready because a piece that's really important to us is to provide a way for people to fellowship. So through fellowshipping, we grow. I mean, everybody that I know who reads a book, when you first find it, you do some personal study, you start reading through it, and then you get to a point where you want to talk to somebody about it. And I think even if you're not talking about the Urantia book itself, to be able to talk to people about your spiritual development, your spiritual ideas or your issues. So there's two pieces. One is we're launching this first piece that Bill and Kay have put together, but also Tom and Marie are developing some pages that are more like life story. Like Marie is interested in presenting information about grief and parenting, and Tom is interested in trying to enlighten people about how they can be more healthy. So it'd be fun to hear that. And then the fellowshipping piece is where we are actually directing people to conversations with us or with some moderators. And April, Helen, and Pamela can talk about that.
Excellent. So, Marie, I'm intrigued. What is your idea about grief? So timely, my gosh, with this pandemic, it's just so timely.
It is, Paula. Yeah, I got involved in grief work about, I became ordained as a minister about 9 years ago. And I just kept having friends who lost their children. Their children died. And so being a supportive friend, I got involved in grief training. And yeah, we're probably at one of the most grievous times we can live in as a planet. People are not only dying, but they're losing their jobs, and there's the possibility that they could lose their homes. And all of those things are grief-producing experiences. Yeah. And grief is an interesting life experience because very few things really bring us to our knees. Grief will basically just suck the life out of you in some instances. And people, we don't navigate grief well in our Western culture. We don't want to approach it very often. Many times people will hear just weeks or months after having a grief experience, aren't you over that yet? And that's not how grief works. And so we don't have a really good understanding about grief. And so this is a really good platform because I can generally talk about what grief is, how it affects our mind, body, spirit. We talk about steps of grief. And it's also a really good place to begin to introduce the concept of God. Because a lot of times, as I said, this brings people to their knees and then they don't know what to do. And ultimately, it can break down some of those defenses and misunderstandings we've had about our relationship with God. And it can actually bring people to a place of engaging in a relationship and building on that. So that's what I'm excited about with Stepping Stones is it's a place to start talking about real life experiences. I'm also going to address parenting experiences. It's a place for people to come and get information about life experience that can ultimately lead them, hopefully, to a relationship with our Creator. And that doesn't have to include the Urantia book. It can just begin to talk about a personal relationship with God. And that's what we're all hoping to cultivate ultimately, hey?
Isn't that the truth? That's what brought me to the Urantia book. When I was 20, I lost my dad. And I prayed specifically to know where my dad was, and more especially to know that he still was. Mm-hmm. And I actually, sobbed to God. I told him, you've got to tell me these things, or I'm not going to be able to hang on here. It's just too tough.
To make it, yeah.
Yeah, and within days, literally, the Urantia book was in my hands.
Yahoo!
So we all know the power of this revelation, right? We know that it answers these unanswerable questions, and it does it in such a way, in such a beautiful way. And, really our challenge is to be able to give that to the world because the world clearly needs it for a variety of reasons, right?
Right. Yeah. Especially, and after all of this is done, and what do we do to pick up the pieces? And that's what grief work tries to help us understand.
And so how wonderful to be able to launch from a platform that's so beautiful and engaging. And now you have a wonderful place that you can really go in depth about grief and, talk about the difficult subjects. And like Tom, you probably, I know you've been wanting to help people grow spiritually as long as I've known you. You're a coach in that way. So here's a platform for you to launch on that.
Right. Yeah. It's a great experience. and lovely people to do it with. So
I know.
it's all really encouraging, and you can't advertise it enough. It's all really good. Yeah.
And I'm sure that when people see this, they're going to want to get involved. So I hope that, there's a way for them. And I think maybe that leads to the next step, which is the spiritual conversations that you said Pamela and April Helen could speak to. So Pamela, tell us about spiritual conversations or spiritual growth conversations. What is it going to be like, and what is the platform? And I know it's kind of exciting because Thomas Orgula, who's another member of the Stepping Stones Committee, couldn't be here today. He brought this to you guys' attention, and it was like the perfect solution, right? So you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Just firstly, when Gina asked me to join this team, it was so preliminary in my, I dipped my toe in the pond of fellowshipping and volunteer work only to have it just take over. And I'm just so incredibly grateful to be here. So thank you, Gina, for offering me, a family here in this group. But, I had been to a few meetings before Thomas had kind of come in, and he started introducing this idea that there's this platform called Living Room Conversations that has been functioning. It's a functioning platform that's been around for about 10 years that was put into place to get people from opposite sides of the aisle talking about, things that matter to them. More kind of political, but he's been doing these conversations for a while and thought this could be an amazing platform for us to utilize, for Stepping Stones to utilize, to transition into having, face-to-face, as face-to-face as we can get over Zoom, conversations about, about this universal language, and engaging people in a new way, in a way that's not preachy, not teachy, but engaging them and opening them up to exploring their spiritual adventure with other people. And so that's really kind of the focus of what we're doing. Stepping Stones is the jumping off point, and you can launch into having conversations with actual UB Red folks who are honing their skills of talking to people in a language that speaks to them, that meets them on the road, that meets them right where they are, just like Jesus did. And so that's what we're going for. And so it's an exciting experiment. But it's going to be amazing. There's just so much to be had. And the evolution of this is going to take off. So, April Helen, do you have something to add?
Yeah, thank you, sister. Mm-hmm. So when Albert and Gina convinced us, it didn't take very long time to get us all on board. Conversations, that's our spiritual growth conversations that we're getting ready to launch in a few weeks, was only one of the means to fellowshipping. So eventually, through our Stepping Stones project, we'll have chat rooms, texting, private conversations, whatever level of comfort that the truth seeker landing on our pages has. So right now, you can either go into the Stepping Stones project and read and choose your own adventure through clicking through all the pages and exploring. Yet also there's an opportunity through the spiritual growth conversations to launch right into how Ms. Pamela said it. You be intelligent people refining the language for universal receptivity. So we are advocating for you to get on and practice your skills, specifically through spiritual growth conversations. Yet, if you want to just get on board and dive right in, go over to living room conversations. Maybe someone can drop that into the chat. And there's over 100 topics, from politics to how to deal with COVID, depression, addiction, spirituality, faith. And you can go in and host your own conversation. You can choose however many people that you want in it. There's talking points already set for you as a host, or you can even get trained as a host in living room conversations, which brings me to another project within this project, is a training ground for refining your skills in the art of universal language without Urantia ease, right? So what we are deciding to launch with, we have a lot of topics to explore. However, the first three that we're considering, and possibly you have some feedback, audience, that you'd like to always send us in. We're open to feedback. We're starting with creative spiritual adventure with friends. That one is all about sharing our inner life and where we've come from and how we want to go. And then a common phrase that you've probably heard before that we'll explore: spiritual yet not religious, spiritual but not religious. And that's all about Spirituality 101. What is spirituality to you? What's the difference? And then in our Art of Living series, and that will, be decades of explorative conversations, we are starting with this concept of communication, the art of communication, the art of reading a room to see how to understand where that person's capacity, spiritual receptivity is, and meet them where they're at. So that's just a little dangling of a carrot for you to join us, whether you are participating or you want to become a host with us. And it's all about, again, refining our language. I think we can say it enough to neutralize it and universalize it. And it's not about selling the book.
Yay. Well, that makes me think that there's a great opportunity here to train outreach ministers. And it really is, outreach as a ministry. And in my experience, having trained a lot of volunteers to do booth outreach, which is, again, overt. We're standing there telling people about the Urantia book. We're not, we stand in front of a booth that's made for the Urantia book, right? But there's a pitfall in that oftentimes, and this is something that I've experienced many times, is the people who are representing these great teachings oftentimes feel very compelled to correct somebody in their erroneous thinking. And they even get indignant and mad, I've seen them get red in the face. I've seen them to tell people by a vow, get a clue, and when you want to put your best foot forward and you want to represent the truth and you want to represent the universe and the loving God, and concepts that are real and good and beautiful and true. But, if you try to take something away from somebody, and Jesus teaches us that abundantly, right? There's a great papers in the Urantia book that deal directly with this. One is Instructions for Teachers and Believers, which I find invaluable. So I guess the point is there a hope that you will be able to refine some outreach ministers to be able to talk in this way without getting angry at the people they're talking to, or, impatient, let's say, not even angry. Angry would be a step further than impatience. but just impatient or indignant at people who don't have the benefit of these marvelous concepts yet. So is that in the plans, Gina? Is that something you guys are
I think
hoping to
it's
do?
a pillar of the program.
Okay.
So, Gina?
Oh, I was just gonna. April Hillen started a conversation with a UUI actually to try and. I guess there are a lot of groups besides us who are thinking in this line of how do we talk to people in this way. April Helen, do you want to talk about your thoughts about that training?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, Ms. Gina. I didn't know if it was appropriate to cross-pollinate, but as a second-generation reader that has seen the ins and outs over my lifetime of what our community movement has exposed and in the process of healing. And so, yes, thank you. As we work with UUI, and I'll be gentle in how I articulate this for respect of their process. In collaboration, though, not only with UUI, but with Pamela, Thomas, and I, we call ourselves the motivators, and several other groups that are having the same conversation, the Progress Project being one, the Christ Experiment possibly being another, of a mentorship training ground where many of the different Urantia organizations can utilize that function to train in two directions, to UB or to not UB. Is that really the question? That we can train in discipleship in whatever language is appropriate from reading the room and seeing who is in front of us. So we're really excited. We don't have a projection date on that yet. I know that they're working diligently and we'll have more information that comes up.
So you're going to work on that in conjunction with Urantia University Institute, is that correct? That they're going to offer a class. Okay, great. And maybe, I don't know, Kay, would you like to speak to the importance of being able to do that and how, that first impression is so amazing and important?
Well, yes. It really comes back to, how did Jesus do this? He went around loving people. He went around asking them questions and listening to them. And eventually they asked him questions. Now, admittedly, when he was speaking to large groups, he told stories, he spoke. But there's all of the rest of life where you deal with very small groups or one-on-one that requires an attempt to do things Jesus' way. And because we have the opportunity to exchange our minds through the mind of Jesus, we really have a lot of resources. It can come through us if we just ask in the moment for that help. It also helps a lot if we've had other people demonstrating it for us. And so I'm really excited about this idea that there's going to be some training and preparation. Elizabeth and Marvin both, in their leading of groups, Marvin Gowan, are very, very gracious.
Right.
And they respond to people when they have made a comment. They always respond to a person by valuing them and making it clear that they value them. So there are many aspects that can be valuable in this training. That's just part of it. But I'm really excited about the fact that we are moving that direction.
Yeah. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It is exciting. That clearly needs to happen. And because I think most everybody who reads the Urantia book wants to share it with somebody. And, it'll only serve us all if we get better at that, and hone those skills, really, really get them mastered. So we have about 6 minutes left. Do you want to tell people what they might do to help, Gina? How they would get involved if they want to, or where they should go, or, ways that they can volunteer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right now we are, well, I have to say that working with this group has been pretty amazing, because when Albert and I started looking at the data that we were seeing, and I actually created some Google ads and pages associated with the Urantia Fellowship, and we have a lot of people coming. We're able to draw 15,000 people a month to our site through our ads, and so the potential of that is huge. And so we're thinking, Albert and I, how could we get people to come and stay? And so ideas, and Albert shared with you some of the models that we created and the analysis. But it was when we started working with this team and some people who have been on the team before, that we started, that the idea started to transform into what it is now. And so I'm sure that it's going to continue to transform, because we continue to learn. And as we start to actually put the ads out there and see what the results are, we're going to continue to shift. And so if there are people out there, I guess there's multiple different ways people can participate. If you are really inspired to create this sort of information on a web page, you can definitely get a hold of me through, you can just go to our website, click on and say you want to you want to talk to me about the Stepping Stones organization, and being involved there. And also, if you are technical and you understand Google Ads and how to create Google Ads and want to help in that way in the creation and analysis of Google Ads, that would be a great help. Moderating conversations, it's another piece. So I'm sure that as more people come on board, we'll get more and more topics. I could imagine that this is going to scale. We're hoping that we'll have hundreds of these types of introduction to the Urantia book, and it can go in many different directions. So whatever people are inspired to share, the book is just has so much breadth, right?
Oh my gosh.
And then once we start to share these things, then trying to have fellowship is going to be a challenge, because while the spiritual growth conversation is maybe a good launch pad, it doesn't really scale to 15,000 people. So we're going to have to get creative and try and figure out how to get people to interact in ways that will inspire them. For me, it was the study group, right? I learned about the Urantia book, and I could sit down with people, and so maybe we'll get better and better at recommending the book and steering people into studying the book. And I would hope that could be a direction that we end up in.
Yeah, you could.
Does anybody else have any? Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. Webinar is a perfect idea. So if you have ideas
on grief,
Tom has an
or whatever. Yeah, Tom. We'll give you the last word, brother.
What I want to share is, in Christianity, most people point to the Bible as, their sacred book, but most of them haven't even read it. They might have read parts of it and heard quotes, but they haven't read it. But they'll believe it if other people who have read it share the teachings. And I think that's the same with the Urantia book. I doubt that the majority of truth seekers are going to actually read the book. but they'll be interested in the truths of the book. And in doing this in our Stepping Stone program, trying to disseminate the teachings of the Urantia book without insisting people look at it or read the Urantia book, but just sharing the teachings, I think is really important, because people are on their own spiritual growth paths, and they might get a little piece of information that helps them in their journey.
There you go. That's the perfect place to end it. And I would just leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Zig Ziglar, who says, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." So we'll leave you with that. I love you guys. Thank you so much for all your effort. You're doing a great job. You're knocking it out of the park. Keep going. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paula.
You bet.